When we come to raise the question, how can I be hospitable towards death? First of all, many people are stunned by even the question. But when we approach the question with respect, like when we approach that dark wood at eventide, we have some choices. One is we can run the other way from that dark woods, possibly missing a great adventure. Two, we can run straight forward into the woods, unprepared. Not a particularly enticing idea. But if we have come along our path to know the difference between lost and exploring, and if our life and our choices have prepared us for this moment, then we can change our beliefs of fear and change our beliefs about what lies before us. Now we can choose to see the dark wood as an exciting place to explore, rather than an experience that we have come to abhor. We can come to find that our beliefs can be changed. We can be equipped, challenged, and invited to explore how it is we can become hospitable to death, how to let go of hostility towards death. Those along the path have found many answers to this, and when you ask them, they share a varied number of stories. One can be a story of a life of spirituality and life after death. One can be a near-death experience, when someone returns telling the story of meeting loved ones on the other side, or stories of going through a tunnel and coming out into an aura of light, or of being met by relatives and loved ones on the other side, parents, grandparents, sometimes children and pets. Sometimes a story of experiencing, sensing, feeling, or hearing the voice of a loved one after they have passed. Telling the stories of our spiritual and religious lives through the years are often stories that people find comfort in, and guidance, and blessing when they approach the question of death. Others will tell stories of experiences in nature, of a sense of awe and wonder, a sense of the immensity of the universe, and quite often a sense of peace and of being what they call at home at last. And some will tell stories of their heroes and helpers and healers who lived lives worthy of honor and respect, that left a legacy of a life of meaning and purpose. Inspiration from these stories gave the courage when facing death. Picturing death in these ways makes us more hospitable to death itself, as though now, in hearing these stories and recollections and experiences, we can even come to imagine inviting death into our house as a powerful stranger. It helps us to make room in our lives for death. That fabric, that part of the fabric of our lives, that is part of the fabric of our many-colored robes. These stories, though, in their extreme form, can have us waiting for a life that is not here, but is there, waiting for another world, waiting for another time, waiting for another place, waiting. In its extreme, this becomes again the denial of death. We don't have to think about it because it won't arrive, because we're waiting for that other time, and perhaps those indeed are there. But right now, we are here, and now. And we must find a way to not be hostile to death, to find ways to be hospitable, but not in denial. To find a way to make room for death, as it does for us. In essence, to find a way to be honorable with death. Every time we see a cemetery, we're reminded of this part of the fabric of life and the robe of many colors. Once I came upon a rural graveyard. Many of the headstones were old and weathered. But again, I felt a poem coming on and sat down in the midst of these old headstones, in the midst of these ancestors, and wrote this poem. Epitaph. It's what we write on our headstone. Secluded in an old forgotten churchyard, headstones with words tarnished, weathered, and faint. A gathering of voices from days now gone, proceeding from woodsmen, farmers, and saints. Words of time, their hallowed meaning, none reluctant, timid, or shy, on the lips of this deceased crowd, warning how quickly the years pass by. Hear all now their pointed stories of faith, sorrows, and things that mend. Such golden threads between the meeting of their beginnings and their end. Between those 2 days in each one's life, though many cares seem to matter, and many really did not, we let the headstones stress this point concerning life's mysterious lot. Between the days of birth and death, what we can and do become is what gives our life grace when life is done. A powerful experience sitting among ancestors of old with their epitaphs and stories to be told in an old country graveyard. I had the experience and privilege of an internship in chaplaincy at one of the country's major county hospitals. And there I learned lessons far beyond words about how to be honorable about death, how to acknowledge our fear and anxiety about death, how to be hospitable about death. I had been assigned to work in the emergency room and had only been there a month. An accident from a school bus came in, and a child had been killed. The mother had arrived, weeping in tears, and was led to the family room. And we heard a rustling sound and yelling in the parking lot. As I went out, I saw the father approaching the emergency room. He threw himself onto the hood of a car and wept. I didn't want to be afraid. I was. I didn't want to be hostile. I wanted to be hospitable in this hospital. but most of all, I wanted to be honorable. And so I approached him and draped myself over him on that hood of that car while he wept, until he came to a place he could stop and asked where his child was. My responsibility as chaplain intern was to take him to the family waiting room and eventually to see the body of his child. But in that waiting room, in the midst of the wailing, of the crying, of the pleading, of the grief and sorrow, I found that to honor death sometimes means to have no words at all, but to simply be present. To simply be present with all. And that is how we can come to not be hateful towards death, to be hospitable towards it, but not in denial, and how we can do it in an honorable way. When the family's pastor arrived, they sang the child over. This deep tradition of singing one over from life to death is powerful, and one that I was introduced to there in the family waiting room in that hospital. It is a song that goes from the beginning to the end, the crossing over, like the epitaph on the headstone, sacred words that say the story of this person's life. So how can we come to respect our anxieties and fears about death and dying, but not be hostile? How can we come to find a path that is one of meaning and purpose and leaves a legacy of love? We must find a balanced perspective, one that is not hostile, one that can be hospitable but not in denial, one that is honorable. We must come to know the fabric of our lives and the role and place that death plays in it, plays in this robe of many colors. We must come to respect the fierceness of death and dying and the honor of it. For the immensity of this universe, when we lay down this robe, is one of the grandest gifts of all. When we let this robe fall. Stay tuned. I'll see you soon.